position. Annie Power at the last race down. Annie Power has gone but in front of the last left. Melody Light
by the far side. They're running up towards the finish, and he's mistaken the winning post. He's mistaken the winning post completely, Roger Loughlin. And Hoyt
from Archibald. Hardy Eustace defends his title, but Archibald is flattened out in second. Then he's followed down right by. He's beginning to power. He's drifting off the true line. He hangs fire. And this was coming home. Churchill's going to win his fourth Betfred chase, and Cordo Star is still the king. Cordo Star wins.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the 15th episode of Tailed Off. This is a no-holds-barred podcast that dives headfirst into the wonderfully weird world of horse racing. Unfortunately, for the second week on the trot, we don't have Matt with us. This is for different reasons. It's been a bit of a technical shambles for us today, for him especially. So, Matt, hopefully you can start your connection and get some 5G in the bag at some point soon. But I am joined by the illustrious Elliot Morland. So, El, welcome. We've got a jam-packed agenda for today. We'll go quickly through trainers in form, and we've got another update on call-out, very exciting one, ahead of next week. We've got a bit on Steward's inquiry, and then we're doing a deep dive into the flat racing, which is now started up proper. So we're moving from the jumps into the flat, and we're looking at the classic generation. We've also got some tips for the 2000 Guineas and some of the other races at Newmarket, and we'll have a brief look at the Kentucky Derby, which starts on Saturday over in the US. So a lot to get through. El, are you ready to roll? We've got the trainers in form.
I'm indeed, mate. Yeah, so trainers in form, still plugging away. Unfortunately, a couple more selections unplaced for the last week, but after 38 selections since we started in January, we are 58.48 points up pod to date. We'll be giving these updates now in points because obviously I give the tips advice in points, so it's a better way of tracking it because obviously everyone's stakes are different, and we all know that points make prizes. So it's a good way to keep track of it. So unfortunately, still waiting for another winner on the Trainers in Form model, albeit I did have one yesterday on the shortlist that won, and I just didn't put it up, which is annoying. But it does show that the system is there. But we did tip. I think both of us tipped it actually last week. The Celebration Chase winner at Sandown at 6-1 against a heavily odds-on favourite in John Bond. So I think we're not doing too badly. And that's 3 Saturdays in a row we've tipped an ITV winner. So
yeah, Elliot Tom done us well. I mean, he hosed up as well, which was great to see. I mean, had Gaelic Warrior as well. I know it was obviously a shorter price, but it was still above even money. So beggars can't be choosers. So we're still giving the people some form of winners at the end of the day. Right, on to call out. El, what's the latest?
Yeah, so some exciting news. Each week that we've given an update, we've kind of edging towards the exciting part that we're at now, which is coming towards this first run for us as an ownership group, which is really exciting. So we had another fast piece of work on Saturday, and then we had a video which Matt will hopefully post after this, of him doing just a kind of routine canter at Warren Hill this week. Then I think he's doing another fast piece either today or he did one yesterday, and he's been entered, and the plan is, as long as nothing major goes wrong, to run at Windsor on Bank Holiday Monday the 5th. And yeah, he's in the first race, so that's at 2:30 over a mile, and it's a 0 to 65. I think it's a class 6. So yeah, really excited, and I shall be there in person. And having been a member at Windsor races for many years, I'm not a member this year, but I'll be going as an owner, so that's pretty cool.
It's not a bad return, no, let's be honest.
I know where I'd rather be.
Exactly, yeah. So I mean, hopefully we can get some content in there for everyone for next week. Get some trainers, maybe even the jockey sorts. Do we know who's going to be riding the horse yet?
Yeah, to be fair, I didn't even check, but Dad said that Callum Shepherd was jocked up on the entry. Nice. So he is a jockey that Jack uses occasionally. I did think it might be Danny Muscat, who he tends to use, but obviously it's a busy day racing wise, so I think people are in other places, but Jack will be on course himself, so
excellent.
Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, fingers crossed and looking forward to it. I mean, Callum Shepherd's still a pretty decent jockey to have, so
Yeah.
Yeah, fingers crossed, mate. All the best, and hopefully be watching the racing in ready for a winner.
Yeah, he wasn't good enough for the Gredleys, but it'll do for us.
Oh, absolutely correct. We'll get some winners out of him yet. Okay, on to Steward's Inquiry. Another one for you, Al. Mr. JP McManus.
So what happens at the photo finish?
They just
Steward's Inquiry.
Yeah, so I saw this over the weekend, and this is a classic Steward's Inquiry in the fact that it actually was a Steward's Inquiry. So it does what it says on the tin in that respect. Again, another one for Matt to post, so the video will be on your screen shortly.
For the last, and it is parked that from Old Bridge and Powerful, still gaining on the outside of the final flight. It is parked that from Powerful, trying to come with a challenge, and then Old Bridge out in front of Dunkirk. Round the bend for the final 100 yards. It is parked that from Powerful and Old Bridge up towards the finish. It is parked that from Powerful the near side. It is close, parked that.
But I think when I talk to people that don't follow racing that closely, you know, kind of the point of this podcast, a lot of people will say, is it fixed? Kind of, isn't it all a bit dodgy? And I defend it kind of vehemently and said it is a very clean and honest sport. But there are certain occasions where even I would have to hold my hands up and say, that just looks so dodgy. And this is a prime example. So we've spoken on this pod about the great owner over jumps, JP McManus, many times. He is by far the biggest owner and keeps a lot of people in business, to be honest. So, you know, the game is fortunate to have him, but he made a lot of his money through punting, and he's a very big gambler himself, and he will bet on his own horses, and he is quite heavily involved, therefore, in the running plans of certain horses and where they're going. And there was it was only a maiden hurdle at Kilbeckan on Friday, but he had two horses in the race, one of which got backed heavily into the 11 to 10 favourite. And then he had a second string, which is the one on the outside in the video with the green and the white star on the cap. And even though that, to be fair, was only 3-1 on the off, clearly JP was on the favourite. And the jockey on the second, Simon Torrens, I mean, you can see for yourself, he tries to do everything not to get in front of this one that's seemingly supposed to win. And it's quite comical because, you know, it's like trying to stop a steam train. The horse is at full pelt. He's got to look like he's trying, but also at the same time not try.
Hold the handbrake.
Exactly. There's a picture in here. Some of the longest comments on because every time there's a stewards, they'll post the comments in the horse's form so you can see for the future. And the jockey was like, "Oh, I tried my best and I did everything to achieve the best possible placing, and he's a difficult horse," and like every excuse under the sun. And yeah, I mean, he got beaten a short head. He did well not to actually accidentally go past him. But yeah, I think that's an absolute stewards. We all know what's happening there. JP's had the money on.
Oh God, yeah.
He'd have been strung up if he got it beat.
I do enjoy the comment. He said the race was less than straightforward. It's like, pretty sure it was if you just literally let the handbrake off. There we go, another winner for JP. So well done, JP. Absolutely doing business as normal.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, on to the classic generation. So, again, a bit more from you on this. I'll let you jump in as you've been in this game a lot longer than I have.
Yeah, and to be fair, before we start, we did get a question on last week's submission from probably our number one fan and our super fan, Mark Pocock. So shout out to you, Pocock.
Love him.
Keep the love coming. We do appreciate it, even if it's only you out there that's this engaged. I did ask for some questions last week, and he asked a question about the flat season, and I knew we were going to dive into that this week, so we've saved it, and it kind of relates to a lot of the stuff I was going to cover anyway. But his question was, do you look for something different in the flat season versus the jump season, obviously when picking the horses, or is it the same methodology? So I think I'd cover that briefly, and then the rest of it I'll kind of cover as I go through the other bits. But yeah, I think they are inherently different codes because obviously you've got obstacles on one and no obstacles on the other. But the process would be quite similar in terms of trip, track, ground, horse form, trainer form, jockey. All of those things are agnostic of the code. One thing I'm going to cover in a bit is I probably would focus a bit more on the breeding because the trip on the flat is much more significant than it is over jumps. The ground is obviously a lot quicker as well, generally speaking. So, you know, that's probably the biggest thing. But I'd say the core principles of trying to find a selection are the same. So if you've got a good method that works for you, in theory, it should apply to both.
Yeah, no, very good point actually you make there on, looking at the pedigree, I guess, and, what the horse has done. Because like you say, you don't get many jump sires and dams like that. It's normally they come from flat. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's different. So yeah, very good point. Love that. Yeah, onto the classics then, Al. So what's what are we looking at from the classics perspective here, and what do we mean by classics? I guess is the other one.
Yeah, so before I get into what the classic generation is, just to tee up the flat season that's coming up. So the turf season, which is basically the flat season, i.e. when we say turf we mean grass, just to make it really obvious. That runs from the Lincoln, which is at Doncaster, it was at the end of March, which we previewed, right until Champions Day. Oh no, Champions Day is actually the end of the Jockeys Championship, but the last race is the November Handicap, which is in November. So it's quite a long season on the flat. But there are three kind of main divisions to think about, which is slightly different over jumps because these are quite age specific. So they get racing quite early on as 2-year-olds, and with the first 2-year-old race is literally on the first day of the season. But you kind of get the more forward 2-year-olds that will come out now ahead of Royal Ascot, because there's a heap of big Royal Ascot 2-year-old races. And then your kind of more 3-year-old horses will come out as 2-year-olds, maybe right towards the end of the season in September and October. But they race against their own age group, bar a couple of exceptions where they can race against older horses. But that's a whole category in itself, and that is the babies of the sport, if you like. Then they split it into the 3-year-old generation, and that is known as the classic generation, which I'll come on into a moment. And there's some real big important races starting this weekend for the 3-year-olds. And then you have the older horse category, and obviously we're talking about horses 4 and upwards. And when you're looking at handicaps for lower grade horses, there is a bit more of an overlap, and often the lower grade handicaps are kind of almost all contested by older horses that perhaps aren't very good. But certainly for the Group 1 races, the Group 2, Group 1 races, there's a much bigger focus on the different age divisions. So that's just a little tee up on that. And then the thing I covered just a minute ago in terms of the main difference is obviously you're focused on speed with the flat. The kind of races start at 5 furlongs, which is the shortest distance, the sprints, but then they go up probably more incrementally in trips than they do over jumps, where you kind of have a lot of horses, your speedy horses are 2-milers over hurdles and fences, and then you get your kind of 3-mile plus stayer horses, so you kind of have two extremes. And then you do have sort of intermediate trips at around 2.5 miles, which kind of draw from both pools of those horses. But there isn't that, although you do get, the Grand National and some big long distance races, there aren't a whole host of different races. You don't go, I'm a 2-mile 1 hurdler or I'm a 2-mile 2 hurdler. Whereas over the flat, and this is what I was saying about pedigree, they are literally bred to get a certain distance, and maybe some horses can sort of go slightly up or slightly down, but it's much more distance specific. So for example, 5 furlong and 6 furlong horses that are the sprint division, some will only be able to do one or the other of those. There'll be plenty of horses that will win a 5 furlong race, get to the front in a 6 furlong race and just fade at the end, and vice versa. There'll be plenty of horses plugging on at the end of a 5 furlong race but just not quite got the speed. And then you literally have 7 furlongs, a mile, and then you have your middle distance class, which is a mile and 2 furlongs, a mile and a half, and then anything above a mile and a half is kind of stayer races where they can go as far as the Ascot Gold Cup, which is over 2.5 miles, which is a big extreme distance. So the flat's more specific around age and specific around trip would be my little tee off.
You do get some obviously jumps horses that do both codes as well. So like the longer distance races from like 1-4 upwards, you might see some jumps horses that go in there. I was just thinking as well when you were talking and when the question that Mark had asked, the other thing that I don't know is so well seen in the jumps, but you do in the flat, is when horses are entered up. They seem to be entered up a lot earlier for like the bigger races, so like your Group 1s, so like your Champions League kind of standard of races, they get entered up like months in advance. So if you have like 2-year-old, 3-year-old races, you can normally see like very early on in the season where they're entered up for 4 or 5 months out potentially. So yeah, that's the other thing to potentially look out for. So if you've got a 2-year-old who's obviously never raced before, but you see potentially, and you can see on the Racing Post app itself, when you go into their profiles, if they've been entered up for a race later on in the year, like one of the bigger Grade 1 races, maybe at Royal Ascot or something, you can see that. So you've got the potential of knowing, okay, this is potentially quite a decent horse if the owners and trainers think enough to enter them this early on. So that's potentially another thing to look out for, just thinking about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely good shout. And one of my old man's favourite things to do is get the long list of the Derby entries as soon as they come out. So all these horses get entered into the Derby before they've ever had a run, because like you say, that you have to book in so early for Derby, so you're just doing it based on breeding, really.
Yeah.
And then he'll just back those horses when they come out for their runs as they get a bit older.
Yeah, clearly works as well. So, okay, fantastic. So, guess what? The classic generation then, Al. When we talk about the classic, what do we mean by that?
Yeah, so the classic generation, as I said a minute ago, is the 3-year-olds, and the reason why we're focused on that this week is because the first classic of the season, or the first 2 classics, I should say, of the season, are at Newmarket this weekend, the Guineas. Guineas is obviously old currency, which weirdly horses are still bought and sold in. And if you watch the episode where we had Peter Sullivan on, breeder, owner, racegoer, he explained that it's you add on about 5% to convert guineas back into pounds. But that was obviously the 2,000 guineas and the 1,000 guineas was the value of those races. And the name has lived on. The classic generation is for 3-year-olds. And essentially it is because that generation is probably the most important, because I wouldn't say that they could all be at their peak as a 3-year-old, because some horses do improve, some flat horses I should say, do improve when they're 4 and 5. It tends to be the way they're bred, it tends to be where you'll get the best of them, because at 2 they're still developing. At 3, throughout the 3-year-old season they can really make an impression on the racecourse. So the whole system is designed to find out who are the best 3-year-olds. And the classic races are the Guineas, as I said, at this weekend, over a mile. And then they step up in distance throughout the season. Then you have the Derby at Epsom at the start of June. And that's over a mile and a half. And then it culminates with the St Leger at Doncaster at the end of the season over mile 6. And essentially that's you've got your speeder miler horses, your kind of middle distance division, and then you've got your stayers at the end of the season. And it's kind of trying to find the best 3-year-olds within those within those 3 race distances to find out who's the best. And the reason why that's important is because not so much for the females, but more importantly for the males. So they have a female version for every classic apart from the St Leger. So you'll have the 2,000 guineas for the male horses, the 1,000 guineas for the female horses, the Derby for the male horses, and the Oaks for the female horses, and both go into the St Leger at the end of the season. So for the male horses, they're known as colts, which we did cover early on in the pod. That means they've still got cherries, as we like to call them, and they're not a gelding, which means no cherries. And only colts can enter the Guineas and the Derby. And the reason why is because they want to find the best horse of that generation. And almost always, if you win a Guineas or a Derby, you will become a stallion and they will be bred off. So I was actually looking to see when some of these races started. So the oldest classic is actually the St Leger, which was first run in 1776. And then the Guineas followed about 4 years later. So these races have been going all of that time for centuries. And every time the breed of the thoroughbred has prospered on the back of who comes to the top in these big races, which is why it gets that name of the classics, because it's kind of, these are the creme de la creme of 3-year-olds, the best of the breed. We find out who the best of the breed is, and then we kind of breed off those horses for the future and make the future stars off those. So really, really important, and a fascinating theme that runs throughout the season for the 3-year-olds.
Yeah, good point. I always find it interesting. I know, obviously, because so many horses normally get, sent to stud after kind of winning, potentially like the Derby and things like that, because they obviously want to protect their unbeaten records, potentially unbeaten records, I guess. Because obviously, from a business sense, I guess, it makes the most sense to have, if your horse is, won a Derby, but then suddenly falls off the face of the earth. When it comes to kind of stud fees and things like that, where they actually get paid to go and shag other horses, their value goes down on that, so they normally will go straight to stud after that, which is a shame, because obviously some of these horses that could potentially go on and train on for another year or something like that to even better things, you don't get to see them again, which can be gutting. But you understand the logic behind it for sure.
And you even get, unfortunately, horses retiring at the end of the 2-year-old season, which I just think is mental, because you've proven that they're what you'll hear a lot in horse racing is precocious, which means they come to hand early as a 2-year-old. But the problem with precocity is that they might not have longevity. So 2-year-olds and stallions no good to you if you want a horse that's going to last longer than a season. So if you retire it to stud, it might have won all the 2-year-old races, but then it produces hundreds of horses on the ground that don't train on to become 3-year-olds. Is a bit of a short-sighted policy. But there was just 2 other things I was going to say about the classics. So as I said, we've got the miles at the start of this month now in May. We have the Derby in June over a mile and a half, and then the Leger at mile 6. So that's quite a big span in distance, 6 furlongs between the Guineas and the St Leger. And to win all 3 races is known as the Triple Crown, which I know, funnily enough, you'll be talking about the American version a little bit later on. But it's something that used to be done quite a bit back in the good old days, and I'm talking about the 19th century and early 20th century. And then there was a big gap until Nijinsky, who is actually the last horse to have ever done it in the UK, and that was way back in 1970. And then fair play to the Coolmore owners who had a really good horse who won the Guineas Camelot back in 2012, and then he was favoured for the Derby and duly won that. And then he went on, because a lot of breeders now wouldn't try to do that because horses that can win over long distances aren't seen as fashionable in the breeding.
Sexy profile, is it?
No, they want all the speedy horses, which I think is a crying shame because some of the better races are over further. But anyway, they were brave, they were bold, they put him in, and I think he was odds on for the Guineas, 2 to 5 for the St Leger, and he was literally just touched off by a horse called NK, who was a Godolphin horse trained by Mohamed Al Zarouni, who literally the very next spring was like strung up and kicked out of the game because it found out he was like massively doping his horses with performance enhancing products and stuff. So there always is such a cloud that we could have all witnessed in our lifetime, a Triple Crown winner, and he was robbed by a horse that was probably
doped up to the
doped up to it. Yeah, I mean obviously they do drug test winners and stuff, so maybe not, but he might have been on stuff with enough time for it to get out of his system before the race. But it's a shame, so you don't see it very often anymore, but it would be great to see a Triple Crown winner again.
When we come on to the Kentucky Derby later on, there'll be a little bit of that mentioned in one of the trainers that's just returning to the track after 3 years of a ban for that exact thing, for doping. So
Not Bob Baffert, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Classic.
So we will see. Well, we'll get to that shortly. Okay. Anything else, El, you want to mention on the Classic?
Yeah, just one final thing. So, as I say, the 3-year-old races do run throughout the season, but there's a much heavier skew to basically up until pre-Royal Ascot. So, as I say, you've got the Guineas and the Derby. You have 3-year-old only races at Royal Ascot. You will still get 3-year-old only races towards the end of the season, but when you're talking about the Group 1s, the absolute, blue ribbon of the sport, from the start of July, kind of halfway through the season, they basically open up the big races to the 3-year-olds, and that means you get quite an exciting second half of the season where it's kind of known as the clash of the generations. So you've got this year's current 3-year-olds, and then you've got the past 3-year-olds that are now 4 and 5-year-olds taking each other on and finding out, okay, well, we know who the best 3-year-olds are now. We kind of know who the best older horses are, who's the best in between them all. Yeah. And you have races so the first one is the Coral Eclipse, which is run at Sandown at the start of July. Then you have like the Sussex Stakes at Goodwood over a mile. You have the Judmont International at York over 10 furlongs. You of course have the King George back at Ascot in the height of the summer, and then it all kind of builds towards the Prix de l'Arc to Triomphe at the end of the season in October, which is one of my favourite races, and it's just great to see the 3-year-olds versus the older horses in those big races.
You know what the stats are between those kinds of races where you have the 3-year-olds that take on the older horses, just to see how well 3-year-olds do versus horses that have trained on them to 4 or 5. And I don't know if it's a bad assumption, but I've always kind of seemed to have felt that 3-year-olds never seem to do too well against the older horses, because I think, my understanding is when they kind of go to 4, they can still be maturing and they can kind of get bigger, stronger, etc. So there's still a lot more maturity left from a 3-year-old to a 4-year-old and so on. I think 4 maybe where they reach the limit, potentially, but it'd just be interesting to see what those stats look like, to be fair.
Yeah, we'll have to get Lee to do some digging for us. Yeah, I think we'll probably cover that when we get closer to that part of the season. Yeah. Because one thing we'll also cover is the weight for age scale. So that some crazy mathematicians or statisticians have worked through how much weight the younger, i.e. 3-year-old horses should receive from their older counterparts in those races, and it reduces throughout the season, because the theory is that the 3-year-olds are still developing, as you said, so they don't need much as a concession. So that's in theory supposed to balance out the age difference, but as you say, it doesn't always play out like that.
Technically, looking at one of those races when we come on to very shortly with the one of the races at Newmarket, which is the Palace House Stakes, which is the Group 3, where you've got a 3-year-old that's coming back into the fray against, so he was carrying I think 9 stone last year, which is £9 less than the 4-year-old plus would carry, so the £9 penalty, I guess, if you like, for being an older horse is there. So yeah, we're already starting to see that, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So bring on the classics.
Yeah, fantastic. Looking forward to it. So with that in mind, as we've already mentioned, we have the Guineas starting this weekend to kick off the classic season, as it were. So we've got the first race that we're looking at as part of the preview here. The 220, the Betfred Suffolk Stakes, Heritage Handicap, which is a Class 2 for 3-year-old plus. Let's start with you, and then I'll give my thoughts afterwards.
Yeah, well, I've got one main selection, and we both like the same one, so I'll do this one, and you can do it justice for the other one that we both like. So yeah, the 220 at Newmarket on Saturday. Interesting little handicap, quite valuable. I'm taking a bit of chance on trust, obviously not on price because he's second favourite at the moment, but I do like Hand of God. Was basically so impressive when he won a 3-year-old only Royal Ascot Handicap, obviously in June last year. Kind of demolished the field really, and he looked like a group horse in a handicap. If he'd run again after that, everyone would have been talking about him. But I think the downside is the fact that he hasn't run since then. He's obviously had an injury or setback of some kind, and he's only just reappearing now. And he's been gelded, which isn't unusual. But it would kind of say if they thought they had a Group 1 horse, they wouldn't bother gelding him just in case he could become a future stallion. So that absence is a bit of a worry, and he did get raised £11 for that win, so it's not like the handicapper missed him. So things will be a lot tougher here. But back in his favour is obviously still very progressive, unexposed. He's won at Newmarket before as a 2-year-old, and I probably wouldn't be so confident if I didn't see Ryan Moore booked for him. I think. No, I did. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, you did. Sorry,
I wouldn't have been
so surprised if he was.
No, I wouldn't have been. I probably would have still been on the fence. But then I saw Ryan Moore, and I thought, you know what? There's a handful of jockeys that if you see him on a horse, you think that's from a punting perspective, that's a positive. And Ryan Moore at this stage in his career does not get out of bed for no reasons. 7-2. I'm quite happy to take a chance on him. The Fav, the Godolphin horse, hasn't raced since Maidan, and I'd always be a bit wary of those horses that have done that. So Hand of God at 7-2 in the 220 at Newmarket.
Lovely, yeah, I like it. I did have a look at Hand of God, but like you say, I think the gap between that, you just don't know how well he's going to come back. But like you say, with Ryan Moore, if he's selected it, can't be a bad thing. So the selection that we both kind of gone for in this is an each way was Galeron, which I think is currently priced at 12-1. I think you've written 11-1, so that may have changed.
Yeah, I missed 12, I think.
Oh, did we? Well, that's a shit. This is the second start for Charlie Hills, so he.
Oh, do you know what? There is 12-1 with Ladbrokes. I stand corrected.
Oh, there we go. I'll get on that afterwards then for sure. It's the second start for Charlie Hills since returning from Australia, so he had a bit of a stint over in Australia where he was actually trained before he went over there by Charlie Hills again. He's since returned. He did very, very little over in Australia from what I could see, running over a mile, 7 furlongs, that kind of distance. It just didn't really seem to do much. But he's come back to Charlie. It's the second start back for Charlie. He actually rode in the Lincoln, which is over a mile in his opener for the season, about a month or so ago. And he finished a credible 5th, staying on well towards the end. So the step up in this to another furlong, I think, can only benefit really. He's out of Galileo, so when we talk about that, we talk about the pedigree of the horse. And Galileo was a horse that was running over and winning, Group 1s over the 1-2, 1-4 distance. So you'd expect the step up and trip to actually suit the horse. I've not quietly confident, I guess, but I'd be quite happy with the price at 12-1 for Galeron to potentially outrun the odds. So could be a good one. I think Al, you've also made a note that he was it 4th in the Guineas a couple of years ago at 150-1.
Yeah.
So another potential positive there.
Yeah, so he's proven at the course. Before someone, our good friend, whatever his name is, pulls us up that we lack racing knowledge, he is out of a Galileo mare, so he's actually not by Galileo, which means it's the dam sire, not the sire. Dam sire.
Not straight out of Galileo. Apologies. Thank you for correcting me on that before it goes live. Appreciate it. Okay. Fantastic. So then we move on to the 255, which is the 5 furlong Palace House Stakes, which is a Group 3 for 3-year-olds plus. Do you want to kick us off again with this one?
Yeah, I see you've also got a mention for this one as well.
I was going to say, this is genius.
And we generally don't compare notes before we do this. We just get straight into it, don't we? So
exactly.
Yeah, to be honest, these are sorts of races where it's Group 3 sprinters. Same with like listed Group 3 sprinters. There isn't a lot between those horses and sort of top handicappers. Yeah. And I always find as a punter, they're not sort of races I like to get too involved in because you just get so many shocks. Proven by my selection, who was 33-1 when winning on his seasonal debut last season in a Group 3 race. And for that reason, pretty much alone, I'm prepared to take a chance on Washington Heights. As I say, on his seasonal debut last year, won at Newmarket in a Group 3. Then didn't really do a lot for the rest of the season, but clearly he performed better at the start of the season. And he's 6-1. You can even get 4 places with 365, and that would be a muggy each way bet. I think this will probably go to the top of the market, but as I say, these races are so rogue. I wouldn't be surprised to see a swinger, but I feel like he's much more of a solid option. So Washington Heights for me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that as well. I've kind of had it between two, so I know it's only 11 runners, but I was kind of a bit stuck between them. So I will put them both up. Washington Heights being one for pretty much every single thing you've said, so I won't touch upon that too much. But I can see why the favourite is the favourite for this. He was pipped in this race last year as a 3-year-old, and so he's obviously been given £9 last year. But he only went down by I think it was a neck or a head, so it was very small margins. So being a 4-year-old now, you'd hope he potentially has trained on from that. But at the price, I think he's 9-2 currently. I mean, it's not backable in my opinion, and that in such a potentially open race. If you went to 5-1, maybe worth it, and each way to nothing. But at this stage, I'd say no. The only other horse that I've flagged up in there is Twilight Calls, which is currently at 7-1. He was 4th in the race last year, having blundered the start completely. I think it was for Henry Candy and had Ryan Moore, funnily enough, on board.
Yeah,
so it kind of fell out the gates a little bit, but finished off the race so strongly. He's obviously moved stables now from Henry Candy to Richard Spencer. This is his first start for Richard Spencer. Again, the break doesn't bother me because obviously the horse did very, very well in this race last year. The only thing that does slightly worry me is Jamie Spencer taking over the ride from Ryan Moore. So you can imagine the horse will be ridden cold out to sleep at the back of the field again. And then try with a late surge if there's anything left at the business end of the race. But yeah, I'd have it between those two, and fingers crossed. Yeah, will we get a winner or two there? It'd be nice.
Most frustrating jockey for you, Jamie Spencer?
I'd say so. He makes it look very cool, calm, and collected, but then
when
he
it
doesn't
works,
find anything. It's just why have I bothered? Why have I bothered? So Jamie, if you're listening, if you ever happen to listen to this, please ride well. Okay, and the final one that we have in the UK, that is, as we've just been talking about, the 335, which is the 1 mile 2,000 guineas, which is, they say, the Group 1 Class 1 for 3-year-olds. Well, I will give you the floor for this one, as I know you've got a couple of tasty ones in here.
Yeah, I've been quite fortunate, really. I've been on a horse Andy Post for the Guineas, which wouldn't be like me. I'd do that for Cheltenham plenty of times, and maybe the Grand National, but I usually don't start thinking about the flat till pretty much the Grand National meeting is over, and we're just getting our way through Punchestown as we speak. So I tend to not to look at things like the Guineas, and one thing I always struggle with is when people are previewing the Guineas, they're talking about last season's 2-year-olds, and I couldn't even tell you who won all the big races last season. It's hard to get your head in the game, but I was just luckily listening to a podcast, and Aidan O'Brien, in the same way that jumps trainers do, they do kind of a head of the season sort of press day, and they give their thoughts, and he'd had a couple of other horses towards the top of the market for the 2,000 Guineas. Obviously, a trainer like Aidan O'Brien, pretty much the best flat trainer there is, arguably in the world of horse racing. He has plenty of horses to choose from for this sort of race, and he mentioned that a couple of those horses were maybe a bit behind where he thought they would be and wouldn't be ready in time, and he mentioned this horse Expanded, who is one of my selections for this race. He was available at 25-1, and I looked at his form, I couldn't understand why, so I'm not tipping him just to glorify the fact that I got on at twice when he's now 9-2, but any excuse, but I would genuinely still fancy him for the race, and I think the good thing is Aidan's. You're going to have to correct me here, but I think he's still only got the one runner, isn't he?
I think he does. I had a quick look through them earlier on.
Yeah, and often, I can't see another one for him in this race. So often when he only rides one runner in the Guineas, that's a bit of a tip in itself, because it tends to mean they know they've got a good one. When he chucks a few in there, it tends to be to find out who the best one is. So that's good to see. Ryan Moore's on him. He was, a decent 2-year-old. He was literally just touched off in the Dewhurst at Newmarket, which is pretty much the premier 2-year-old race at the back end of the former season. So unfortunately, the form hasn't been tested because the winner isn't going to come out until Ascot, and the third reappears in this race as well. So we don't know if the form's any good, but given that the other horses are in Group 1 races, they can't be mugs. And obviously that was a Group 1 race itself. So at 9-2, the price is a bit skinny now, but he's just a master at this race. And Ryan Moore on board, I'd fancy him to go and get the job done.
Nice. Any more in there, Al? You've mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I will mention the favourite. I'm not going to back the favourite at that price, but he was so impressive in the Craven Stakes, which is the main trial because it's over course and distance a few weeks before the Guineas, and I wouldn't be surprised if he goes and bolts up. But I think the good thing about the Guineas, it's all about untapped potential, and so I'm always quite keen to take on favourites in that race, unless it's a Frankel year, which, let's be honest, was one of the best horses we've ever seen.
Ask the bushes.
Yeah, £10 for every bush. And I am also, so full disclosure, I am also on Wimbledon Hawkeye each way at 33 to 1 for the Guineas, just because when he got beaten in the Craven and finished second, he immediately went out to 33 to 1, and the trainer said that he's 100% going to the race. And I thought, just to nick a bit of value, I thought, that seems a bit silly. So I was going to come here and say you should bet on him at, what is he now, 20 to 1-ish for the Guineas. You probably get better on Labrooks, do you? They seem to be best priced about everything. Wimbledon Hawkeye 20 to 1.
20 to 1. Yeah, 20 to 1.
But then I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, then looking at the prices, the horse that finished fourth that day that I actually backed on that day in the Craven is Benevento, for good old Kia Drabishan and Ammo Racing, who, is one more cover another day. But I just couldn't believe this horse was 80 to 1, because he ran a nice race in the Craven. He was bang up there in the lead, and then about 2 furlongs out he got a bit outpaced. And then if he'd have just folded away, I wouldn't even be considering him for this. And I say fair enough, 80 to 1's the right price. But he actually come flying back towards the end, and he was closing on he wouldn't have got to the winner, but he was closing on Wimbledon Hawkeye all the way to the line. And I just thought, given that Bet365 are offering 4 places, which I think is quite generous because there's not that many declared, I could see if they go much harder up front, which they will do in the big race on Saturday as opposed to the trial race, which he last ran in, and there's a bit of a pace collapse, I could see him flying home for money in the frame, maybe not challenging the winner. But I just think 80 to 1 is such a big price that I wouldn't put you off it. And I'd rather stay it now and stick my chin out and be completely wrong than wish I'd said something. And he goes and gets placed.
If you're back an 80 to 1 winner, I think that'll do it.
80 to 1 places, mate. That's all we want.
Oh, we'll take a place. We'll take the win. We'll take it all. Bring it all. Okay, fantastic.
What have you got?
Could kind of add on to that. So, I mean, Fields of Gold was, like, say, the obvious one. And then you can completely see it. 7 to 4 Way is the favourite, having bolted up in the Craven Stakes, which is over course and distance. My only kind of potential concern would be it's only been 17 days since that race. Is that going to come around too quickly in such a high-profile race? Who knows? I mean, I don't know if I'd be getting stuck in at 7 to 4 and that. So I had a quick look through the market, and I came across Green Impact. It's currently 16 to 1 for Jessica Harrington. The horse has been aimed at the race since winning the Group 2 Champion Juvenile Stakes at Leopardstown last year, having beaten, and I'm probably going to butcher the name of this, but I don't know if it's Delacroix, is it? I may be wrong. Who's franked the form since. He won the Group 3 Autumn Stakes at Newmarket next time out, finished a nose second in the Group 1 Futurity Trophy at Donington, at Doncaster, and then went on to win the Group 3 Ballysax Stakes at Leopardstown again on seasonal debut this year. So it's pretty good form, pretty solid form. The horse is rated, I think, 116 potentially, or 114. It's clearly a decent horse that he's beaten there. I've read what Jessica Harrington was saying about the horse, and they're really, really pleased with the horse. And I think he's entered in all 3 of the Guineas, the French and the English, and potentially the German Guineas as well. But yeah, I mean, you've got that. The only concern I would probably have with the horse, not the horse, sorry, but the trainer, is she's 0 for 29 in the last 2 weeks, so her form is pretty slack. You never know if they like the horse. Could be an each way at 16, so that would be my pick. But yeah, I wouldn't be as confident as potentially as expanded as you were. For that.
And where did you get that selection from then, out of interest?
Where did I get it? What do you mean? Did you mention this?
Oh, here he is. You put money on for me.
I did, didn't I? I wasn't sure, because I looked at it, I thought, do I recognise the name of this horse? And I was like, I'm sure that Elle may have mentioned about it, but then I thought I'd have seen it in your selection, so I thought, maybe he's not done it then. So,
no, I just think he's too short now. That was the only reason, but I do think he's got a good chance.
Yeah, no, I really do. I thought just reading it and looking at it, just thought, okay, it's 16. So I'd say Jessica Harrington's form is not particularly brilliant, but doesn't count for squat at the end of the day. On the day of the race, if the horse is good enough, the horse is good enough. So,
indeed,
we will see. Okay, so last but not least, I'll make this very short work, and Elle, feel free to add in any thoughts towards this. But as we mentioned, we have the start of the classics over in the UK. But if you go across the pond to the United States, we also have the start of their classics. So they also have, as Elle mentioned earlier on, the American Triple Crown. and that kicks off this weekend at the Kentucky Derby, which is at Churchill Downs. And the race is on at 11:57 p.m, so just before midnight on Saturday. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about this. I know even less about this than I do about UK racing, which doesn't say a lot. I have put the pictures of the field up that was on the Racing Post, so you can see the current prices and things, so hopefully you'll be able to see those. But I had a quick look through just to see, because it's obviously a pretty big race meet for them. I mean, part of this as well, which has got me quite interested in this, is the fact that there's a current Netflix series called Race for the Crown, which I thought was going to be absolutely shite, being US based stuff. But it's actually been pretty good. I've watched the first 2 or 3 episodes. And they're just coming around to the Kentucky Derby at the moment in one of the episodes I'm on. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see how they approach their racing, and the owners there. I mean, they've got some seriously big characters in there, which is just mad. I mean, have you watched this?
I've watched. I'm still on the first episode, but even that alone, I was like, Christ, that guy with the suits.
Oh my God, it looks fake tanned galore. I mean, I can't think of the guy's name, but good God,
John, someone I think it is. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, it's interesting to say the very least.
Just looking at your list, has Frankie Dettori not got a ride in the Derby?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I'm surprised by that.
But I mean, he did last year for Bob Buffett of all things, I think. But I mean, it'd be interesting. I didn't scan and see his name in there. But you never know. I could have missed it. But in terms of the race itself, it's over 1 mile 2 furlongs on the dirt, as opposed to turf. So a little bit different for us. They obviously have a lot of dirt racing over in the US. But in terms of the prize money there, it's massive. The overall winner gets £2.4 million or $3.1 million. So it's not a race to be scorned at, that's for sure. And it's got a big field size of 20 that are going to post at present. I had a look at some of the stats as well, because, like I said, I know very, very little about this, but only 4 winners have won in the last 10 years on the race. No international horses, so you do get some that come over from like the likes of Japan or the UAE. None of these horses that have travelled over previous years.
Ireland, actually.
Yeah, and Ireland, I guess.
Remember Mendel Henson?
Say again?
Mendel Henson for Aidan O'Brien.
When was that?
We were in Tenerife at the time, if you remember.
Is that one of the ones that actually won? So it was one of the.
No, he didn't win. No.
No, I was going to say he couldn't have won.
No, he was cooked after a furlong. Hated it.
Do I remember this? I don't know. Yeah, that's the trouble. I think you have to be so because it's dirt. I think the horses have to be literally I think that you either love it or you hate it. It's just like Marmite. You either get on with it or you don't. And which is why I think it's really just for the US horses, because they obviously train on it all the time. They're used to it, so they can get on with it far easier than others. The other stats that kind of came out, the last 5 winners lost their final prep run ahead of the Kentucky Derby, which is quite interesting. And as we mentioned earlier on, the trainer Bob Buffett returns after a 3-year ban, when his Kentucky Derby winner, Medina Spirit, won the race and then was subsequently failed a drugs test and unfortunately died a few months later, which is both obviously sad and horrific in equal measures. So he's returning to this race after a 3-year ban. He's got the best record of any trainer in the race, having won it, I think it's 4 or 6 times. I did see 6, but I've also seen 4 times, so I'll have to check the stats for that one. He saddles 2 in the race in Rodriguez and Citizen Bull, and both with the same ownership. But in terms of the horse that I've kind of looked at, there's a horse called Grande, which is running at 25-1. It fits a lot of the trends that show the winners for this race. Came second last time out to Rodriguez over 1 mile 1 furlong in the Grade 2 at Aqueduct, and the jockey at the time is now no longer riding for this. So it's actually John Velasquez, which is a very, very well known jockey over in the US. He's one of the top jockeys there, so I only see that as a good sign. I'm thinking 21. I mean, I'd have a very, very, very speculative punt at 25-1 on that, just for a bit of a laugh, because it's one of the bigger races. But that would be my pick. So do with that what you will. But I don't expect much out of it from me. Anything from your side, El, to add to it? I know you've obviously done a few bets beforehand in the States, but maybe not the Kentucky Derby. It's more.
Ask me about 10 minutes before the off on Saturday, when I'm about
Fair
10
enough,
points
yeah.
down.
I was going to say when you've had a skinful, and then we'll just pick one at random.
That's when I'll be betting on the Kentucky Derby.
There we go, son. There we go. We look forward to it. Okay, fantastic. I think we are all wrapped up then for this week. So thanks, El, for all the insight into the flat, and thanks as well again for the questions that we've got, Mark, and all the others that we've had. We really do appreciate it. Let us know if you've got any other questions for the podcast, what you're liking, what you're not. Drop us any comments and any thoughts to tailedoffpod@gmail.com. You can watch this obviously on YouTube and listen to it on Apple and Spotify. You can keep up to date on social media because we'll probably be posting some pics and more trainings and form on Instagram and TikTok. But until next time, have fun, stay smart, race hard, and try not to be tailed off. Thank you very much, guys.
Position. Annie Power at the last race down. Annie Power has gone, but in front of the last length. Melanie Light.
Right the far side, they're running up towards the finish, and he's mistaken the winning post. He's mistaken the winning post completely, Roger Loughlin, and Hoyt